I was thinking recently that I've been lucky enough to live a fairly charmed life in terms of never having been mugged or attacked on the street or robbed for money, apart from one time, which was by the police. When I grew up in Cork and I'd go out to a pub or to a nightclub, I'd come back at 2 or 3 in the morning, leave at 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'd walk home pretty much every Friday and Saturday night for many years. And it would take about 45 minutes to walk home from the city centre to my house, and there was never any issue, never any problem. I never felt any danger or any threat. Now I know and I'm aware that this is something that women and girls cannot do, and sadly it's just a sad fact of our modern world, a sad fact of the world itself. In general, it kind of surprises me how much the other direction people are now. People do have a lot of anecdotes of times they've been robbed and knife point and attacked and so on, and it sounds horrific. It sometimes amazes me how cautious people are. I mean, they won't walk around the street maybe for 5 minutes, and sometimes I think it's a little bit over the top. I mean, I used to live in an estate, and I remember arranging to meet somebody who lived at the other side of the estate, and he drove down, and I would say it was probably a 2-3 minute walk, and maybe it was, I'd say maybe 2 minute drive. I mean, I was kind of shocked at that. That was one of the extremes, but that isn't too uncommon, I think. People have an aversion to walking in modern culture, and it's something that I've always enjoyed. So I've always enjoyed walking home, particularly at night. It's kind of a relaxing way to wind down from a night out. So I did it for years in Cork. When I came to Dublin, I walked home as well, even though it took much longer. Sometimes it took an hour and a half. And it was somehow even safer. There's more people around. I was sent to work in New York, and I thought, there's no way I can get away with it here. It would be foolish. And I came out of a bar at about 3 in the morning, and I thought, okay, I better get a taxi. And I saw people walking by, and I thought, maybe I'll just join them and see how it goes for 5 minutes. I won't take a risk. I'll be sensible. But then 5 minutes turned into 10 and 20, and I ended up walking pretty much half the length of Manhattan in the middle of the night, and there was no problem. And there was it was oddly very safe. And sometimes I think danger of cities is sometimes exaggerated, and I think it's probably a media thing, that crime and particularly personal crime is a sensational kind of thing, and it sells a lot of headlines. And now there is a certain amount, obviously, and the people are right to be cautious, but I think there's a bit too much hysteria. That leads me to the story that I was thinking about recently, and that was, I was sent to work in Ghana in Africa, and I fell in love with the place. I absolutely loved it, particularly the people. The people were just absolutely lovely, and there was a kind of an innocence about them, and it reminded me of Ireland kind of back 20-30 years ago before we adopted a certain level of cynicism perhaps. But it was just absolutely beautiful place, absolutely loved it. And I asked, remember when I was working there, I asked my driver, I said, look, is it okay to take photographs? Because I've been getting sort of ambiguous impressions about whether that was culturally acceptable or not. And when not in Rome, don't do as the Romans do. So I wanted to just see what was acceptable. And he said, absolutely, we want you to take photographs. We want you to take loads of photographs, go back to Ireland and tell everybody there how fantastic the place was. And I was totally in line with that, because I loved it. I did think it was fantastic. I love taking photos and videos. So I thought, great. And while I was there, I kind of was still fairly restrained. I mean, you do have to be reticent in taking photos anyway. I mean, respecting people's privacy and all that kind of stuff. So I came back with a certain amount. And then some years later, I was sent back to Ghana again to work on a different project. And before I left, I looked at the photos that I had, and I was frustrated at the lack of photos that I had. It was very sparse. And I thought, okay, on this occasion, I'm going to set that right. I'm going to document the experience a lot more, because it is a very unique experience, certainly totally different to what I'm used to here in Ireland. And the people are fantastic, and there's just such a chaotic, wild sense to it. It's just beautiful. So I arrived, started work, and I asked my driver again. A different guy said, look, is it okay for me to take photos? And he said, absolutely, even more insistent this time. You know, we want Ghana to appear all over the world. We want, you know, to raise the profile of the country and the people, take loads of photographs, go back, tell everybody how fantastic it is. I thought, brilliant, this time I'm going to do that. So as time went by and the days went by, I made a point of doing that. I was taking photos, and I knew that there were a bit touchy about official buildings like the Parliament building and stuff like that. You're forbidden to take photo of that, for God knows why. I mean, people take plenty of photos of the Dáil there and here in Ireland and House of Commons and all that kind of stuff, but for some reason they're touchy about it in Ghana. Fair enough. Photos of just the markets and the people and the shops and the experiences and stuff like that were just fascinating. I mean, the markets can be very chaotic. I mean, you see thousands of people thronging the streets, and there seems to be 1,000 sellers for every buyer. I don't know how anybody makes a crust out there in those markets, but that seems to be secondary to their just enjoyment of life and being there and meeting people and just talking and chatting and being a real community. So I was snapping away, and everything was fine for for a certain period of time. And then one day we're driving along, and I'm taking the odd snap here and there, and I take a snap, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, 2 police officers emerge. They run after the car and they're gesturing to stop. Now this is actually in the middle of the night, so it was, well, not in the middle of the night. Funnily enough, there the sun rises and sets. Sun sets every day at 5 o'clock. So after work, it would always be dark, which is kind of a strange feeling when you're from Ireland, because, you know, when you feel the warm heat, usually in Ireland that means it's summertime and the sun's setting at about 10 p.m. and you get the long summer evenings. There it's near the equator, so the sun sets at 5 p.m. regardless when you're going. So it was dark, and we pull over at the side of the road, and it's that eternity feeling of being stopped in a car and that long lonely walk of the police officers in the rear view mirror as I'm in the back of the car wondering what the hell is going to go down. So the police officers arrive, tapping the window. I roll down the window, and encountering police in Ghana is a totally different experience than in Ireland. In Ireland, Garda Síochána do not carry weapons. So it's an unarmed police force. Detectives do, but you don't see those. They're undercover, and it's covered up as well. So you do not see explicit carrying of arms by your police force. We never see the army on the streets, so it's totally culturally opposite to many countries, including Italy, where you see army on the streets all the time, and there's a very kind of militarized feeling to the place. So so these 2 police officers, they are tooled up to the hilt. I mean, they have automatic weapons, the windows going down, and they're trained on me. So when you're in a car full of people and you are the one being targeted at gunpoint by police in a foreign country in darkness, you know who your friends are, and the answer is nobody. So for all the advice and everything else that I'd got from the driver and all my colleagues previously, everybody was quiet. Nobody wanted a piece of this. I was on my own. So it was female police officers as well. So one of them started getting very excited and babbling and, you know, talking about me taking illegal photographs, and I don't know, there was all sorts of allegations being thrown out. I don't know whether she thought I was a spy or whether I was trying to sneakily photograph police. I mean, I was quite reluctant and quite sensible in taking photos anyway, and absolutely no way I was going to be taking photos of police deliberately, because I wasn't that stupid. And they would be the last people that I would want to photograph, as it turns out. But look, as it turned out, the whole motivation behind her stopping this car was she saw an opportunity to shake me down for a bribe. something out of the ordinary is happening. We can squeeze a few quid out of this guy. So it's a difficult moment, and time is moving very slowly because I'm in the back of the car. I don't know what the culture is. No one's prepared me for any of this kind of stuff. And it becomes clear she needs money. There's going to have to be an exchange of money here. So you're conflicted in that, the bribe of a police officer is an offence. So you're going to be committing offence, but it's absolutely necessary at the same time here. So I'm going to have to try and work something out. But anyway, as it turns out, she takes my wallet, cleans me out of everything that's in there, about $200. And $200 is probably the equivalent, as checked out earlier or later, about a month's salary, or maybe 2 months' salary for a police officer in Ghana. So it was quite a good fine for her, quite a bumper day. Before she got the wallet, there were heavy threats. The threats were getting heavier and heavier. She was mentioning, we're going to take you down to the police station. And as the driver helpfully pointed out afterwards, that would be, if anybody gets taken out to the police station, that is not a good sign. You don't want to be taken down there without anybody knowing where you are. Anything can happen to you. So she also took the camera. Now the camera was pretty expensive. It was $5,000 for the camera, not including the lenses. So she's going through the photos and all this kind of thing, hoping she'll find something official, like a photo of herself or police officers or public buildings or something to squeeze money out of. Obviously she didn't find any, because I checked later. It could have happened by accident. She couldn't find anything, but still she wasn't going to leave without cleaning me out. So she stole 200 quid from me. I wasn't going to argue with that. And look, the $200 wasn't a big issue. It was just the experience wasn't pleasant, obviously. And once she got the 200 quid from me, the camera was handed back. The demeanour totally changed. And that was the sickening part of it, really, in that she was smiling, giggling, laughing at me, saying how nice I was, how she hoped I had a great trip, to come back again. She was even, it was sickening. That was the sickening part of it. We rolled up the window and we went away. The hilarious part of it is, everybody was incredibly wise after the fact as to what I should have done, should and shouldn't have done. Whether I should have given her more, whether I should have given her less. Everybody was very wise then, which was, as you can imagine, extremely helpful to me. But I remember thinking an awful lot about it afterwards. The people in Ghana were fantastic. Absolutely lovely people. There was never any, I walked around, and the reality was, it was an interesting experience. I walked down a market and I was the only white guy for, 10 miles around. I couldn't find any other white guy around. It was an interesting experience to see it from that perspective. There were thousands of people in this market, and I was the only white guy, and people would drive along. As I was walking along the path, trucks would drive along full of lads at the back of the thing, and they'd slow down and they'd say, "Hey, white guy," and and they were doing it because they saw this guy out of the ordinary and they wanted to have a chat, and they were all incredibly friendly. It was fantastic. It was a strange experience and a very warm one. It was, everybody I met was incredibly warm, and apart from the police, who were complete bastards. And it led me to feel sorry for the people there. Obviously the economy is in a basket case. Average salaries, for professional people are about $1,000 a year, and it made me feel a lot of compassion for the ordinary people there and anybody who wanted to better themselves or try and succeed. Because if you have, just imagine that encountering the police, encountering a checkpoint for the average person over there must send them a feeling of dread, because it's going to cost them to try and get through a checkpoint. How much are they going to get shaken down for? If you're running a business and things are going well for you, you have a new car, the police are going to shake it down and say, "Oh, we want a piece of that. We see you're doing well," and pay up. And there is no repercussions whatsoever by the looks of it. And in Ireland, it made me appreciate when I came back the freedom we have in Ireland, the freedom of movement, and the freedom against being harassed and stopped on the street like that, which is an important freedom, and people take it for granted. Up to 20 years ago in Ireland, it was illegal for the Gardaí to stop you in a car unless they had a reasonable suspicion that you were committing a crime. Now that changed when they brought in random breath testing, so it was then legal for the police to stop you and even if they didn't suspect you of drunk driving or anything like that, but they could breathalyze you and stop you and breathalyze you. And a lot of people would say that that was for good reasons. It would cut down on road deaths and so on. And the next big change was during the coronavirus year in 2020, during that sort of circus, when the Gardaí received additional powers beyond that to put up roadblocks for movement of people and to question where people were going and how far they were travelling and so on. Again, people would say for good reason, but having seen how that can be exploited and abused, it left a bad taste in my mouth. I've always had a lot of respect for the Gardaí in Ireland, and that chipped away a little bit because it's something that it's difficult to appreciate. But in Ghana, the sight of a road check, in many areas of the world, probably a quarter of the world, the sight of a police checkpoint must send a shiver down people's spine. And it's very ironic that I had never been a victim of crime before, and it took the police in Ghana, they were the first people to rob me. And it got me thinking as well about the bribery culture. And when I was going to work in Africa, and I was in Libya as well, and people would say, oh, you know, you have to bribe everybody, you know, the airport people, you know, you have to bribe the police, you have to bribe the people going in here, you know, if you're doing work and all this kind of stuff. And that kind of sickened me in a way, because having seen the people of Ghana, I love them, and I love to see them prosper and succeed and everything else. And by us going there and bribing people, it's ensuring that their economy can never prosper and the social structure can never survive, because you're propping up a system of corruption that will block any form of success. And the corruption, I mean, there are reports that corruption in Africa is at the level of $1.03, which is shocking. That means 30% of everything that's spent is going to corrupt sources, and it's impossible for a normal, successful society to function at that level. And for us to kind of go, sure, I'll just smoothen my way through, you just bribe everybody, then we're becoming part of the problem. And you could say I was part of the problem during that incident. And yeah, it's true, even though being at gunpoint, I didn't have much of an option, so I felt at the time. So it was an interesting anecdote, and it's something that, yeah, I've travelled all over the world, and I've walked home in big cities in the middle of the night and never been the victim of crime, and it took the police in Ghana to be the first people to rob me.